Hello and welcome to Power Reflections, a proud member of the Duff Network where we reflect on Wildbow's most Mammarian, that's going to be great if this is the final arc, work as it releases. I'm Ruben Morehouse.
And I'm Elliot Diebold.
And we're coming at you live in the Discord 24/7. Well, 27, because that's the first chapter we're talking about, and it's from Verona's perspective.
Nailed it.
Verona is led by Alpi on a trip to the ruins. So I wrote this at like 2 a.m. last night, and I'm realizing now how bland of a sentence that is.
Yeah, there was a funny conversation about 10 hours ago where we realized neither of us had written any notes yet. So it was fun.
It was good
yeah. After watching the finale of Amphibia and playing 2 hours of Splatoon, we then talked about how we hadn't done the work yet. But yeah. So I think it's really fun because we sort of jump into the ruins with Alpi, and both chapters this week do that sort of thing where they just kind of throw us in the deep end. You're like, what the fuck is going on? Like this one, it doesn't take you too long to figure out they're in the ruins, or we might just get told or whatever. But like, there's definitely hanging over you for the first time. It's like, the fuck is Ronnie doing here? Like,
yeah, I feel like next chapter kind of came together pretty quickly for me, like that. Like I got it pretty quickly, and maybe that means I'm less of a Lucy and more of a whatever Avery. But this chapter, the ruins, like they're so conceptually hard for me to just like visualize.
Yeah, but even I agree. I sort of figured out it was probably soot sleeves related fairly quickly, but there's still even once you've gotten there, you're still kind of there. But why the fuck is Lucy here? Like, especially Lucy is not the Kennedy you'd think you'd find in Soot Sleeves' castle. And that
we'll
chapter
get to
goes
that
into that a lot.
next chapter, I guess. Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know, I kind of enjoy that sort of vibe of, especially after we've had our big sort of Christmas party, and now it very much feels like we're waiting for a bomb to go off, and also we will get to that in terms of like the truce ending. But so both of these chapters kind of just chucking us in a deep end, and you're like, okay, I think I know where we are, but why are we here? Like, why is Verona deep in the ruins? Why is Lucy deep in Soot Sleeves' Hold? These are not places you'd expect to find either of those two Kenneteers.
Yeah, speaking of things that we struggle to understand, Alpi's accent really is at its most unintelligible here, right? Maybe it's because we haven't seen Alpi that much recently, but even Verona, who's like notoriously good at communicating with people who it's difficult to communicate with, she is really struggling. I pulled out the quote, "Hoard your wished," which I still am not sure exactly what it means.
So I'm pretty sure it's hold your something. I think hoard is like Scottish accent for hold.
Yeah, anyway, good times. It was very fun.
Yeah, I will say in Verona's defense, I feel like Verona's specialty is very much like non-verbal, like non-traditional communication, not just like, I don't understand heavy ass accents. But yeah, like what I love is now Alpi's reached the point where like whenever she says a big sentence, 9 times out of 10, a Kenneteer then sort of thinks what she said. Like, there's a number of times in this chapter where, like, Alpi will say something and then Verona kind of translates in her head, which we don't even usually get for Tashlit. So I just thought it was funny that, like, I assume Wildbow got a lot of feedback that people couldn't understand what the fuck she was talking about at the start of the story.
Which I think is great. It's part of Alpi's charm.
Yeah, well, it makes me like I read a lot of Redwall growing up, and Redwall did this a lot. I don't know if you've read those and if this reference makes sense to you at all, but Redwall did something very similar. A lot of the characters talk with very thick accents, and it's written out like Wildbow does for Alpi. And that series did fucking nothing to help you understand those people. You just had to like push through it. So yeah, it kind of like I love it because it's something from one of my childhood like favorite series, but it's probably a good idea to include those translations.
Yeah. I think so for sure. I haven't read Redwall. My impression of it is it's effectively a book series based around Soot Sleeves' kingdom. But I really don't know.
A more violent one, Soot Sleeves, if she spent more time in Kennet Below.
yeah, cool. But yeah, hey, Wildbow's word of the day calendar definitely had typhlotic in it recently, right? Because that word has come up a bunch. And before the past few days, I had not heard of it.
Yeah, there was there was a fun discussion on our Discord where, because we talked about it, last week in Adrian's one, where we're like, but I think of the word as having to do with Typhlosion, the Pokemon, because it's the only place I've ever heard it before. But I think that comes from like a different root word or something.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
but yeah, you're right. It's fine. It's as you said in the notes. It's a word that I'm going to remember for the rest of my life now that I wouldn't have known a week ago.
Does a typhlotic other literally just mean an other without eyes? Like, or
Yeah,
is
yeah.
it like,
If you just plug typhlotic into Google, it's
yeah?
basically just blindness.
Well, that's what it means, right? But then, like, but the way it's just so funny to me that it's such a like a typhlotic other is like a thing when it just kind of means any other that's blind, right?
I think
Like,
it. I think I assume like it's specifically referring to the fact that like so many things in the ruins don't have eyes.
yeah,
And it's probably just the fancy practice word for
word for
like
that. Yeah,
others without eyes in the ruins or some shit. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I feel you. Anyway, that's fun stuff.
I really enjoyed this anglerfish. That like you could see how that thing operates pretty well in this environment normally because it's just sitting like sending out echoes as like bait. Um, just unfortunate for it that the target this time was Verona, who's probably the Kenneteer who's most able to just be like, "Oh, this is fake. I will ignore it then."
Yeah, yeah. Lucky, um, lucky it's Verona, and even for Verona, it almost kind of works on her, right? Like,
Yeah, well, she has the like, "Hey, are we doing anything about this?" And then it's like, "Oh, it's fake," and Verona's like, "Oh, cool." Switch
yeah,
off caring about it. Whereas I feel like Lucy and Avery, it still would have bugged them.
yeah, for
Um,
sure. Yeah.
there's also the hilarious bit where Verona suggests that she could astrally project into the deep ruins to Alpi, which is just like everything we know about these two environments. It's like that's a fucking terrible idea, and Alpi says as much in more colorful language.
Yep.
But like aside from the obvious comparison to what happened to Adrian when he astrally projected into the ruins on accident last week, I thought this was like a really fun thing where like Verona suggests an idea, and Alpi's just kind of like, "That's the stupidest shit I've ever heard. You're an idiot. Do not do this." And Verona is very much just kind of like, "Okay," and like moves on. And that's like I guess the reason I'm bringing this up is because we used to see Verona get really insecure about reactions like that to her brainstorming ideas.
Mm,
She just takes it in stride now because, as we've been talking about for an arc and a half now, she's in a pretty good space mentally, and I think that this is a great lead into this chapter, which is really challenging her and pushing the regression button on a lot of things. And so it's kind of fun to see her like get a little moment like this that is reminding us how good a spot she's in right now, is while Bo's essentially about to cut her legs out from under her.
hmm. Yeah. Um, oh, poor Verona. But yeah, yeah, she's doing good. She seems to be really kind of in her element. And this whole trip is basically just a bit of her flexing and doing a ritual that
Yeah.
she maybe doesn't necessarily need to do, but just kind of wants to do.
Well, no, I think the first time they went to the ruins, like Verona was the one who sucked at it the most from memory.
Mm,
Like she was the one who was really struggling there. So I can kind of like yeah, again just a bit of a growth that she was just like I'm going to go deep ass into the ruins.
yeah. Yeah. But yeah, so deep pass into the ruins, as you said, Verona does a ritual to kind of understand the book sales that she's done better, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and we got to call it the visuals in this chapter. You mentioned like visualizing the ruins, and it's like they're jumping through different layers, and it's all so fucking cool and like they start in one that sounds like it looks like the Twilight Realm from Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess, but then the
Mm,
majority of this section takes place in like these giant sloped like shafts or pipes above like nothingness. Like I don't know, that's just there's something so like grand and awe-inspiring about the visuals of these deep ruins. It's
mm,
terrifying.
mm. Yeah, yeah, definitely. There's this kind of chasm vibe,
Yeah.
this deep chasm of emotional damage, I guess. And it's great.
Well, it really feels like you're at this like bottom layer of reality sort of thing, and also that like I think the thing that really sells it is some of the set dressing as she starts doing this ritual is like an incarnation of pain, just like launches itself into orbit to like move to the next layer of reality or whatever. Like
Mm,
that just sells
mm.
like how fucking bonkers this place is. It's
Yeah,
great.
yeah. Um, so yeah, let's talk about this ritual because it seems to me like it was a bit of try getting it. Well, I don't know. It's read to me like Verona was getting a deeper understanding of the books that she sold to people and kind of why she had sold them to these people, right?
Yeah, I think so. The ritual is basically to cash in because she makes the cards when she peddles shit, and that basically
Hmm.
like ties the purchaser to her or whatever, so she can extract the price later.
Mm.
And then this is her cashing in 3 of them to basically kind of get some of the information they learnt from the books she sold them. So she absorbs, I think it was like escaped artistry, some shit about herbs, and navigating bureaucracy, which seems helpful for, spending time in Kennet Found. Um,
Yeah. Or if they
but
start
yes.
hanging out with the man more, I guess.
Yeah, like, I mean, it seems like a pretty like obviously peddling is something that's been framed by the story as 9 times out of 10 the people that are doing it are like cursing people and being bad and shit. And Verona's very much trying to do like environmentally, socially friendly peddling. And the idea that she's like, look, you learn a bunch of stuff that helps you with your issues from my book, and my tax is just you got to give me a bit of that info too. Feels
Mm,
pretty fair. Like it definitely feels like something karma would be behind.
mm, yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. I mean, like Verona explains that her vibe is just kind of doing anything to get small advantages, right, in the time that they have available, which I think makes sense.
Yeah.
So I guess that's a good call.
Yeah, I like the way she frames it to Raquel later. Is like part of her idea is just if she knows bits and pieces about just a fuckload of topics, it makes her really hard to plan against because there's so many tools in her toolbox,
Yes,
essentially.
which is Verona's whole deal, I think, as
Yeah,
well.
exactly. Like it's very Verona, and it's also like it's such a perfectly Verona anti-Fae measure. Like I couldn't help but think like
Mm.
like she's talking about how it's going to stump Charles, but I feel like Mariska's really going to be the one who like the next time she tries to enter fairy mode to plan against Verona and she sees all the shit Verona knows, she's gonna be fucking hell.
Wait,
Um
she knows how to navigate bureaucracy? All right, cross off those plans.
yeah, well, it says yeah, just so many little things you have to be able to account for now. It makes it so much harder to like model, I guess.
Mm.
So it's a fun strategy. Although I like personally I was like, oh god, I'd never do this. Like for me, the early part of learning stuff is like the funnest time. I don't know why you'd want to like magically skip it.
Yeah,
But anyway.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
Um,
sorry, I do think mechanically as well. This is hilariously perfect because Verona sets up. It didn't work fully well, so she doesn't like know these things by heart. Like she's not like a trained escape artist or a trained herbologist or whatever. Now it's like they're kind of fuzzy memories. So there's there's this real wiggle room where like she might remember them sometimes, she might not. Like it's very
mm,
perfectly flexible for Wildbow to not have to like keep a sticky note on his monitor reminding him of Verona's skill set so that he has to model her every time. But he can
mm,
like sometimes it's clutch, sometimes it's not. It's really cool. It's like
yeah.
not it makes her not broken because if this worked really well, she'd just be doing it a lot and she'd just become too powerful. And also the fact that it only works sometimes makes it more dramatic.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think it's a really cool way to give Verona some of these things, but again, not make it too like. And now she's a master of this and that.
Yeah.
It's just
Yeah.
like, oh, she's picking up these things.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Oh, and there's Alpi's like potential clubhouse down here. There's like the Hive of Nightmares, and she's like, "Oh, I don't
Hmm.
go in there. They might give me more jobs." And Verona's like, "Or they might not." And she's like,
Yeah,
"It's not
that's
worth the
that's the
risk."
high. That's my hive of nightmares. Is where I go somewhere and they give me more jobs and things to do. I can understand why the LP calls it the hive of nightmares.
Yeah, but also she's a nightmares, like
Mm,
so you think yeah, like I don't know,
and she'd
it's
be
just so
into it.
funny to me
Mm.
that like of course Alpi's the sort of person who like lives near a hive of nightmares, but for like presumably 50 years has been like, oh, it's not worth the risk.
Mm.
Like, I don't know, I think you just send Verona in there and be like, hey Verona, can you suss it out for me? Like, it's wild to me that she just bury her head in the sand about it for that long and not like try to scope it out.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I guess. I mean, I guess it's it's
It's
wild
very Alpi to
to
not have done it.
Verona to do that. It's not wild for Alpi to do that.
I'm just saying, if it was me, I mean, I guess this is the reason I'm not a mayor, but like
Mm.
for me, it would be crazy to have that clubhouse there and not like try to scope it out. Where it's very Alpi, like she's the sort of person who just
Yeah,
sits in her niche and yeah, but yeah.
yeah,
I mean, we just saw how much of a ball she had with the nightmare market, so pushing boundaries was good for her a bit, and maybe she needs to look into this place.
yeah. So yeah, Chuck shows up to see what they're up to, kind of pleads with Verona to be like, "Hey, don't make me kill you." And Verona's like, "Haha, no way."
Do it, you coward.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just continue to love the dynamic Charles has here with the Kennedys. I mean, especially Verona, but like he's so close to being fair and reasonable here that you can see why he mistakes himself for being like that.
Hmm.
Like, he essentially says that he will honor, like, the awakening oaths that he doesn't really have to honor, but he's like, "I'll kinda, you know, do some work to protect you. I can't fully stop the forces that are arrayed against you, but, like, I'll do some stuff. Like, just promise you won't act against me, and we can be on the same side." And it's like, he's so close and yet so far. That's what I always love about Charles. Like, he likes the Kenneteers and he doesn't want to fight them because he knows the Kenneteers are some of the best of the practice, and he just can't make this leap from maybe that means I should reevaluate why I'm against them. Um,
Mm.
but yeah, I don't know. I love it. Like, there's something so fun about this like all powerful god tier enemy, and part of the reason he hasn't come down like a hammer on the protagonist is because he wants them to be on his side, and he just doesn't understand why they won't do it.
Yeah, yeah. Poor Charles. You
Like
can't help but feel bad for him, can you?
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
he's got more. He's got a. He's a better father to Verona than her own, in way, low bar, but
yeah.
yeah, it's so fun.
And Verona's kind of reasoning for not Verona entertains it, like, or feels like she could entertain it, but her response is basically, "No, I care about Avery and Lucy more than I care about you." You know, and I
Yeah,
think that's great.
well, it's a super like I felt like this was a really important moment because of that reasoning. Because yeah, like Verona essentially says I could probably live with it, but
Mm,
Avery and Lucy couldn't, so I have to
yeah,
say no.
yeah. And what's going to happen? Avery's going to move away, and I'll have to leave my
Yeah,
domain. No way. Like, not doing it.
and it's not just about the fact that she's like half of it is she's choosing like community over her own self-interest, which is obviously Pale's been talking to death about that since chapter 1 or chapter 0, I suppose. But I think like this is also such an important message because I love the idea that like Verona has become someone who, even if she doesn't have that innate moral compass or whatever, she's like surrounded herself with good people who allow her to kind of do it by proxy.
Mm,
Like, it's almost more important a message for a story like this in my mind to be like, even someone like Verona who doesn't get this naturally can find their way there because
mm,
Lucy has had a pretty strong moral compass since day one, and it's good that she always makes the right decisions. But if you're not that, like if you're more like Verona and you don't find that naturally, like if the story was just kind of like always be like Lucy, then you're kind of like, well, I don't know, that just I'm like Ray, that doesn't come naturally to me. That doesn't help me. So I like the idea that it's like even if you're not like that, you're like Verona, you need a bit of help. It's like Verona has been surrounded by these systems that let her make that right decision and see what's right. And I think that that's so important. Yeah, it's not just about the people who can do it naturally. It's about if you're not that person, learning to surround yourselves with people who let you do it.
mm. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's interesting. Like, this is another beat in the Verona's morality quilt, right?
Yeah,
But
because
I think it's an interesting one.
yeah, there's obviously room for debate after the end of Arc 19 about whether Verona does or does not innately have some sort of moral compass. But personally, I'm more interested in the version of the story where you lean more towards she doesn't necessarily have an innate one, but she has a learnt one, and that's the point. Is that you can't like you don't have to pop out of your childhood or birth or whatever with a moral compass. You can like learn from the people who have it around you.
Mm. Yeah, yeah, for sure. I mean, that's kind of the whole thesis statement of Kenneth,
Yeah,
right? So
exactly,
it's
and that's why I thought
yeah.
this was such an important moment because it's not Verona saying yes for her own reasons. Verona looking at the good people in her life and saying, "Hey, they couldn't do this, so it's a bad thing."
Mm,
Yeah.
yeah.
I guess to get a little bit less serious, I love when Charles accuses them of potentially trying to use Alpi as a middleman. And Alpi just responds to him, "Oh, because I have ever so much free time. I do. You red rockets as a judge, sir. Get on with it, eh? Like just." Her equal opportunity sarcasm, because she's sarcastic to Verona a bunch. I just love her energy of just being shitty to anyone who suggests that she's got more time than she does.
I also love in the response to, "Oh, could Alpi be a middleman?" And it is made immediately clear that it would be impossible to use her to transmit messages
Yeah.
because she says something, and I'm like, I think I can pick out maybe one or two words in that I understand."
Yeah, yeah, that's so good. I was enjoying her sass to Verona so much, and I was so glad to see it pointed at Charles too. Like that's just who she is.
Mm.
Also, when she wakes Verona up by slapping her, that was fun.
Yeah, good times. Does she wake up though? Because she moves from the ruins into what I'm pretty sure is a nightmare. These potential renters being absolute creeps and VD being a loser as usual.
Yeah, and this is Wobber tapping back into what I think is the most horrifying horror that he does, which is that really just benign,
Mm,
realistic stuff. Like the
mm,
worst horror is just they're creepy 20-year-olds, and I fully believe that these people exist by the hundreds around Canada and Australia. Like Verona always cops this end of the horror the worst, but yeah, it's just like these guys are so incredibly believable. Like I know these guys. I've met these guys before, you know? Like
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. It's crazy to me how little Verona's dad cares about this. Like the bar is so low, but even so, to fumble over a bar that's this obvious is insane. Like because to start with, Verona's kind of like, oh, they skeeve me out, and she's not especially specific in in the first bit, and he's dismissive, and I'm kind of like, okay, like you're being a piece of shit, but she hasn't actually like clearly articulated
Yeah.
what's going on here, and then she does, and he's still just like, well,
Mm.
that's not enough. And I'm like, no, 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 no. That's way more than enough. No, oh gosh. Yeah, it's fucked. It's actually fucked.
I yeah. I mean, it's I'm pretty confident in my read that this is like it's just he's dug his heels in on this because he felt disrespected that he didn't get invited to the party, that she's been leaving the house a lot. And so it's just like he just doesn't want to give her a say or give her the veto as a punishment for, not giving him the attention he is entitled to. And it's just fucking wild that he's so insistent on that he's letting it get in the way of the fact that like Verona is like, I, your 14-year-old daughter, am uncomfortable with how they sexualized me. Like,
Mm,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. It's crazy. He just doesn't care, and it feels like he like almost he pushes back against her when she gives a slightly vague version of it, and then it's just like, well, I've said that, and now I have to
Yeah.
stick to that forever because I'm a piece of shit, and it's atrocious.
Well, yeah, he didn't want to like lose the argument. Like it felt like, yeah. I
Mm,
feel like his ego is all wrapped up in this and is the problem, and he's let his ego get in the way of the fact that like of listening to Verona and how important her concerns are.
yeah,
Um, and I mean, I guess maybe we'll get into this a bit more when she calls David in a sec. But like,
yeah.
there's a really interestingly tricky side to this, which is that starts to come up, which is Verona has all but abandoned this house. Like she spends very little time in it. So like there's that small ounce of logic that doesn't apply to this situation, but applies more generally to the idea that it's like Verona has essentially released a lot of her claim on this as her home. It makes sense that of course she has less say in what happens there. And like I'm thinking of the moments where like David sighs a bit when he learns that Verona hasn't been spending time in the house. Like there's an element of like it yeah, what shouldn't apply in this situation but could apply in others is the sense that she's been spending less time here, so she does kind of have less say in what goes on there to some degree. And this is what's so frustratingly delightful about like Brett is these no-win scenarios because you're damned if you do, damned if you don't. You either spend time in the house with Brett, which is a lose,
Mm,
or you run away from the house and then Brett gets to pull shit like this more easily because you haven't been spending time there anyway. So it's your own fault for not being aware of what was happening. Like it sucks. It's perfect. I love it,
yeah.
but I hate it.
Yeah. Um, yeah. So, yeah, Verona calls in David, which she obviously is very loath to do. And so this kind of is like a pretty good marker
Yeah.
for how seriously Verona's taking this. And it's such a bummer. It doesn't seem like it's going to make any difference. And you can kind of feel it. You can feel David being like, oh, I want to help, but I don't think I'll be able to.
Yeah, it just sucks because David was so awesome
Yeah.
before, and he still is, but like also like, it makes sense. Kenneth's in the middle of nowhere, and of
Yeah,
course, he
and he's
can't,
like a
like, be
cog in the
100%.
system, right? Like he's
Yeah.
a good person, but that doesn't mean he's not part of a system that kind of can't handle this situation.
No, but I mean, what system can handle 100% availability like that too?
Well, true.
Like, I guess that's the thing that you sort of sit with is it's like, yeah, like, Cass could be better for sure, but to a certain extent, it is unreasonable to ask most systems to always have somebody who can fully understand the nuances of Verona's situation ready to
Mm.
go at any time. Like something like Cass, I just don't think ever can exist in a state where it can handle every emergency it needs to. Um, and that's just what Verona's running into. Like, yeah, David talks about bringing a colleague in, and I'm sure all of us were just thinking, "Oh, but he's not going to get it." Like, or sorry, I should say they're not going to get Brett. Like, it took David long enough to figure out exactly how awful Brett was.
Yeah, I suppose. Um, yeah, it's rough. It's sad. Poor Verona.
Yeah, and I think this is why this is such a fun challenge from a story perspective to throw at Verona, because we've been talking for like an arc and a half now about how well she's been doing. And
Mm,
that's in large part because she got to a place where she could kind of Brett just hasn't really been a concern for an arc for more than an arc and a half.
mm,
And this is really the big thing that's challenging her progress. Like, she gets her first stress headache in what feels like arcs and arcs.
mm,
I can't think of anything. I can't think of it having been this intense since before summer break. Probably even around arc 10, like when she went away with her mum.
mm.
Or at least since Cass got last involved. And I think, yeah, this is such a fun challenge because it's like, okay, it's time for Verona to prove, I guess, whether she has grown to the point where this won't, cause her to sink like it has in the past. Like,
Yeah, I
yeah,
don't think it's going to cause her to sink, but she's just, I mean, like her domain is already her home, right, where she spends most of her time, and this is just further widening the rift there. Like, I don't know.
yeah, yeah. I guess I'm just more thinking like so many of Verona's problems early in the story were because of her home, and then
Mm,
recently she's kind of gotten away, and it hasn't been a big of a thing, and now it is coming back, and I guess this feels like a chance for this new, more confident in herself Verona to sort of prove that she won't, yeah, I don't know, slip back into bad old habits and close herself off, and like will she keep using the new connections and networks she's made that have been supporting her since she got out of that house?
mm, yeah, yeah. So yeah, Verona heads back to her domain to get away from all this shit. And she kind of struggles to get along with Raquel until she realizes it's because she's a horse girl, which is a very funny realization.
Yeah, just completely neglecting the fact. I also thought it was so funny that Verona is like, "Oh, I've got to get away from Brett's house because I hate it there, and there's going to be potentially people living there that I don't like. Better go back to my domain where Raquel's there because Avery invited her without really running it past me. Um,
Mm,
like, she's got her own, like her other house also has a kind of tenant she's not really thrilled about. I just thought that was, yeah, so funny that it's like while Brett is really reaching a new low point with what he's doing to the house, the other house also on Half Street, it's kind of not in the best state either.
mm, yeah, yeah.
Um, I
Um,
also like I especially I related that to I really related to the vibe of like just when you're in a shitty mood, you just want to be alone and in your own space to process it. So like, going back to your domain and there's some rando there who
there's
you've
somebody
kind of
else
said they can
there. Yeah,
stay,
yeah,
and so you can't kick them out. It's like, oh fuck.
yeah.
Like I was like, she needs to, because she has like three versions of the house, right? She needs to just get like one of them, like Kennett Below, and just make that the like Verona only layer
Yeah,
of
well,
the
she
house.
she doesn't have. You need your decompressing space, right?
Yeah.
Like, and she doesn't have that right now.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, she sort of does, but yeah, she definitely needs a corner of the domain, which is like only for Verona, and where she can do her screams, and other people don't hear it.
yeah, yeah. Um, Raquel is very Mussa in this domain, and it's quite fun. She sees, oh, you've got a goblin, and it's like a rat infestation, which is classic.
Yeah, yeah. I also love the cookie and the biscuit joke,
Mm.
especially because I really didn't see it coming because we call them biscuits here in Australia, so I don't really think of biscuits as the hoity-toity term
Yeah, no,
for
me
them.
neither. But maybe that's because we're musses.
Yeah, we're too fucking fancy. That's our problem.
Hmm. Yeah.
Um, I'm too bourgeoisie. Um, yeah, I just love Raquel and Verona as a pairing because they're so similar and also so just completely opposite. And like Verona
Mm,
talks about this a lot, but like I went back and skimmed the stuff where they were like hanging out in the market to the fairy markets together in
mm,
Arc 8,
mm,
and they're just like yeah, there's some overlap there, but like Raquel is so much more of that like Kenneth above like fancy sort of
mm.
stuff. And that's really just not something any of the other like halfway house refugee girls have ever been about. So again, just a fun extra challenge for Verona, and that there's someone here who I think she can find a connection to, but they're gonna have to get through a lot of bullshit both of them are quite hung up on for personal reasons to get there.
Yeah. I mean, what do you think we'll get that? Do you think we'll see them bond over the course of this chapter? Or
Yeah,
chapter,
I do.
arc? Mm,
I think there's stuff there. I just think both of them have baggage in what they see in the other person that they need to get through to get there.
mm,
Whereas, like Macaulay was someone Verona just naturally clicked with. I think Raquel is someone she'll get there, but it's not as natural a fit.
mm. Yeah. Yeah. Um, so yeah, we jump forward to Yeast Inception, and Verona is made aware of Avery's budding family dynasty, and as we all would be, gets a little bit jealous.
Yeah, I so just before we do get to the Kelly dynasty, I want to call it the moment where Sylvia shows up with Gillette in a cat cage because
Mm,
it was so funny because like you could tell Verona was offended. We know Gillette was fucking off her chain that she was in here, and it was just such a classic Verona or Hayward sisters, I guess, moment that just to be like, what did you think Sylvia was gonna do? Like just walk around with a loose cat? Like
mm,
any sane person is going to put a cat in a cat cage, of course. But they, yeah. So like, it's so funny because of course Verona would hate it, but also, what did you think was going to happen? Like, I love
mm,
that they both missed it.
yeah.
Like these twinsy moments that that the Hayward sisters are having are great because they also have the same blind spots a lot of the time.
Yeah. Yeah, they we see more of this again next chapter, and they are a delightful pairing. I mean, it's really kind of working out. I guess we're going into that. Yeah, they're gonna be familiars kind of vibe.
I mean, yeah, they're certainly going to be buddies for a long time. Whether they
Hmm.
formalize it or not, we'll see. But yeah, like definitely, yeah, the way they're teaming up to shit stir Lucy next chapter, you're right. Like they just, yeah.
Mm,
Um, also, sorry, when Sylvia comes in, she's had her rendezvous with the mayor. And once again brings up just how fucking confounded the mayor is that they don't want to do this regularly. Which
mm,
I still think is a sensible position for somebody like that who isn't aware of magic to maintain. Um, but I guess what is like really important here is the Kennedys get the offer to sit on like the business council that Mr. Black and some of the others are wanting to put together. And I
mm,
thought that was felt really important to me because something that the story has been talking about a lot since was the time the Kennedys failed to make the magical version of Ken.
mm,
That was in God, like Arc 11 or something. And like I felt like that moment where they couldn't make a magical Ken component has been the impetus for a lot of their focus since summer break of like uniting all the different parts of Kennet. So this to me, them being invited as like Kennet's practitioners being invited into Kennet Above's Innocent Business Council very much feels like them kind of getting their win in that regard. Like
mm,
this to me is like magical Kennet getting a bit more unified with innocent Kennet is obviously the business council doesn't know that they're inviting Kennet's practitioners, but like this is one of those it's both situations that comes up in the other verse where I think this is like Kennet the innocent part of Kennet recognizing the practitioners and all they do because of the Christmas party they put on. So we're getting to the point where I feel like they could try and make a Ken component for the magical side of Kennet, and I think it would work now when you're getting moments like this where they're being invited to these councils.
mm. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I, it's interesting. I don't know. Like, I feel like it will not be a good idea, or I feel like it will not be a good idea for the council. I feel like the Kennetiers. as Lucy seems to kind of be on the same page about, the stuff that they want to do does not run, alongside a nice orderly Kennet in that way. It's kind of, it has to have a level of chaos that I don't think they can really justify.
I think they have to give it a go though, like because the whole point
Mm,
of all of this and the whole point of the way they're building the market is they want it to be connected to everything. Like what the unification of the three Kennets is all about is like trying to take the best parts of both and make them all mesh. Like getting that Kennet above influence and this innocent council, which gets to make sure that they express their opinion that things should happen that way, even if they don't get it 100% of the time or whatever. I think it's important that they have that ability to like have a say. Like this is just to me the extension of like the way the market is growing to just include innocent stuff.
mm,
So yeah, I do agree. There'll probably be some rocky stuff, and there'll probably be a lot of the Kennetiers saying we're going to do it this way, and we can't really explain why. And I'm interested to see how 40-year-old male businessmen cope with hearing that from 14-year-old girls. But yeah, I really have faith in it working because it just feels like such a natural extension of everything they've been building, finally hitting the innocent side of town.
mm. Yeah, yeah.
Um, they also they talk a lot when they're explaining to Sylvia why they don't want to do it regularly. How part of their thinking is that criminals thrive on patterns and easily exploitable systems, and it felt like one of these things where I was like, are they talking about Charles? Like, is this them trying to subtly communicate stuff to each other? Because it felt like such an important conversation, but I was like, I can't really tell what the subtext is here. Is it Charles? I don't know.
Mm, yeah. um,
Um, yeah, sorry to get back to the Kelly dynasty that
the
you
Kelly
brought up. Age.
dynasty. Yeah, let's talk about these Kellys.
I love the first thing I want to talk about is how much this is clearly stressing Avery the fuck out. Like, there's a moment where Verona calls Avery cranky, and she's like, "Yeah, I'm cranky," and then her phone rings, and she goes, "I've got a fucking phone call. Fuck." Oh, and I was just like, Jesus, Avery just said "fuck" like 2 times in a row.
Yeah, she's popping
I don't,
off.
I don't think we've ever seen that from her before. This is the equivalent of like Verona screaming in her dad's face. It feels like. Um, and so yeah, I guess talking about how Verona's like stuff with her dad is kind of like this really interesting big new complication in her life as we head into what might be the final conflict against Charles. I think it's so fun that yeah, Avery's is seemingly just the stress around her whole family coming into this. Like,
Mm,
um, there's some really fun stuff to talk about how the Kennetiers are like going through inversions of their original character stuff that I haven't thought out well enough to talk about on the podcast here. But like just Avery's stress about having to include her family and like protect them is just going to be so fun, and it's such a perfect equivalent final challenge for her, I guess.
mm, yeah.
Um, Also, just because her family is such goofballs, I think Avery, ironically enough, plays a really good like straight man, and so it's really fun seeing her like be the one to freak out when Sheridan brings up before time monsters and stuff. Like I'm gonna keep enjoying that dynamic. I think.
Mm, yeah, I think so too. They're very fun. Yeah, I don't know what form the Kelly dynasty is going to take, but it's just so much fun.
Yeah. Yeah, Avery's talking about like all the ways they're slowly like training them on stuff. Like they're getting tutoring from the Garricks, which I just think is hilarious. And like, there's obviously great comparisons to do there between how the Negatiers are being introduced to the world, and even to some degree how the Kennetiers were. That Miss wasn't like, let's get some practitioners in to tutor you. She kind of got them to blackmail their way into a school.
Mm,
But yeah, it's going to be so fun seeing how these guys go over their first couple of weeks. I can't wait to see the Garricks try to tutor them and
mm.
probably try and throw a marriage at one of them at one point. Just keep Avery in the family indirectly. If Avery won't marry one of them, just pick Rowan or Sheridan.
Yeah, yeah. Terrible idea.
Yeah, but see, the fun part is I can totally see the version of this where they're like, "Oh, we do arranged marriages," and Sheridan's like, "Tell me more."
You think?
Mostly just to piss off Avery, like,
Yeah,
and Kelsey.
yeah.
I
I
wanna
can
see
see that.
Kelsey and Avery's thing to Sheridan being like, "Tell me more about these, hot wizard husbands I'm gonna get."
Mm. What would you do if Sheridan ends up getting arranged marriage to Easton? Pro
I
or
mean
anti?
I mean, I don't know. That would certainly be fun. I feel like you could do worse for both of them.
Interesting. Hmm. Anyway, um, so yeah, Nicolette calls the Kenneteers and tells them about the Negateer raid, and we get a bit of a fun convo between Nico and the gang.
Yeah, although I feel like I want to talk about Nicolette more in the conversation they have with her in the next chapter, which is the big one. But I really like so Verona kind of talks her into doing a bit of a reading for them on their futures. Everyone's favorite phone psychic, Nicolette.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess like this is another one of those things where it feels like we've been talking to death since Arc 13 about how the big thing Marcy did to the Kenneteers in Arc 13 was she got them to not be on the same page, not be on the same wavelength, and they weren't working together, and that's why the culprits won.
Mm.
And Verona is sort of directly addressing that problem in the story now, where she's like, I just want to make sure we're on the same page. So they get this reading, and it's that delightfully vague prophecy thing where they're all on the same page. And Verona takes a lot of comfort in that, but I couldn't help but dwell on the part that said they're a little bit askew. And like part of me wants to read the askew as like the positive kind of, they're different, but they're on the same page thing. Like they don't all fight the same way, and that's the strength and diversity, like blah blah. We've talked about that to death, but I think it's so fun that as much as it says they're all on the same page, that doesn't necessarily mean it's a good page. That doesn't necessarily mean the askew doesn't matter. Like it's so fun.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. They're uh they're in it. They're in it together. They've got some, chaos brewing, I guess, which is a very fun vibe.
Yeah, yeah.
And I guess that's the vibe you always get from a Verona chapter. For Lucy's chapter, maybe is a bit more dour about the whole thing.
Yeah. I mean, this Verona chapter very much ends with her sort of. I feel like the takeaway from this is a Verona chapter is like she like goes bad for her at home, but she's able to put it behind her and focus on the fact that she's very much in sync with the other Kenneteers in the way that she wants to be, and so it's not getting to her like this thing with her dad might have a couple of arcs ago, and she would have just
Mm.
run off without them and gotten the furs all by herself and put them all in danger, and it worked, but it wasn't a good thing.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. Um, should we get into 20.8?
Yeah.
Yes. So Lucy is hanging out in a castle, and it's very fuck, what's that Disney movie? Is it Snow White? I guess it's more Fantasia, isn't it? But anyway,
It's like
the,
all. What are you talking about? It's like all the Disney movies.
yeah, you're right.
What are you
It's
going
a
for?
classic Disney thing, isn't it? Anyway, some real Disney shit is happening, but you can tell it's a bit more
Yeah.
MA15.
Well, it's like Sleeves is very fun because it's like poverty Disney, right? Like everything is
Yeah, true, true.
like the poor version. It's like the castle, but it's all kind of shit leftover bits. Like
Yeah, yeah,
it's very much the Disney aesthetic, but if you had no money.
yeah. Yeah. Anyway, so they're kind of gathering to have a fun chat about the Negateers and what's going to happen.
Yeah, and again, we did already talk about this, but I love this cold open of just like I was like, this feels like a path, but this isn't an Avery chapter. What's going on? And then you realize it's Soot Sleeves, and then you're like, why is Lucy here though? Like, she doesn't belong in Kennet Found, and yeah, well, obviously we get there, but like right from the get go, I think that vibe is really strong. Like Lucy's just looking around this castle, and she's like, this place makes no fucking sense. There's all this description of how the way all the servants are coordinating is just chaos that she doesn't understand, and like Verona and Gillette are like all about it, and Lucy's just looking at all this going on. She's like, "The fuck is happening? Can't we just get to business?" Like she brings up the fact that she's never really vibed with this place later, but you can really feel it right from the get go.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting, isn't it? Lucy's vibe this chapter. I have a note about it later, but I'm going to pull it in earlier. Like, there's a lot of negativity that just kind of bubbles up.
Yeah, yeah, for
um,
sure. And she does address that because like Lucy brings up the thing that I don't think we've talked about for
mm,
what feels like 6 months now, which is that way each Kenneteer has one side of Kennet that they just don't vibe with, and Lucy's
yes,
is Kennet Found, and
yes,
she's like here, and she's aware of the fact that she doesn't vibe with this place, so it
mm,
puts her in an even worse mood than she was when she arrived.
yeah,
Um, But no, I think you're right. It's very fair to say that like Lucy's descriptions and narrations can come across as borderline bitchy at times in this chapter.
Mm.
Um
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and I think yeah, like that's partially just like Kenneth found grating on her on top of just I think she threw the Christmas party and that was great and that was like one of her big victories. But the whole point of it was like as a last hurrah or thing that they're fighting for, and now it's just that's over and they've got less than a week till this truce is over. So it's just like all business, I guess. Like it's just she's worried, she's stressed. They're about to go to war against like a godling, well, two gods, effectively. And
Mm.
meanwhile, she has to sit here while sleeves put servants put a table together. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, I think it's just like the stress and the way she's in vibe with this place, just like bouncing off each other.
Mm. Yeah. 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 You're right. A mix of bouncing off of Lost and just kind of pressure.
Yeah, but I think like because my big takeaway from this chapter is yeah, 'cause, like as you said, like Lucy is clearly like internally seething at a lot of stuff that happens in this chapter, but I think she's like a real trooper about trying to fight those instincts.
Mm.
Like obviously one of the easy examples to point at is like Monty shows up and she's just instantly kind of terrified when there's like spider legs because she's got her arachnophobia,
Yeah.
but then she pushes past it when she realizes it's Monty, and like Monty's like I'm I'm sorry, and she's like no, it's fine. Like she's trying her hardest not to let these things get to her, and there's a bunch of stuff like with the Turtle Queen too. Where yeah, it's just like Lucy's I guess kind of aware of her short fuse and her biases with this stuff, and I think like again much in the same way how with Verona and her innate moral compass not being necessary. I think it's like the important thing about being able to work in a team that Lucy's sort of making the case for here is like she's naturally just not connecting with some of these people and never will, but that doesn't mean she shouldn't look to people like Verona and emulate their behavior to find a way to work with them.
Mm.
Like yeah, yeah. So it's saying it's just her version of what we're talking about with Verona. Like with Verona, she naturally is able to communicate and work with these people, whereas Lucy kind of has to do it in a more deliberate, focused way. But she does because she's learnt this from the other people, and that's
Mm.
more important than just being like, "Hey, look at Verona; she's a good role model."
Yeah. 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 Um, Now, I have to point out something that I thought was fucking hilarious, which is when Miss enters this scene, there are just kind of birds flying all around her to block, obviously, to block the view of her. And it just was like, this must be the most extra way that Miss's vision has been blocked, just by birds flying past her, doing things constantly. It was such a ridiculous image. I absolutely loved it.
I loved just how like Miss always does this. She enters the scene with a big entry line. Like they're just in the middle of the conversation and Miss just like interjects and she's
She
just like in an
she
ideal world.
times her entrances very well, doesn't she?
Yeah. Like this is what if I ever like reread Pale after the story's done, I want to like try and tally all the big dramatic entrances Miss does mid conversation because it's got to be well into the double digits of just conversations where she just enters with a grand statement like obviously, like on our Discord at least, the every time someone mentions Solomon, someone comes in to mention that Solomon was forsworn because that dramatic entrance she did in Wise Interlude has become so iconic.
Mm, yeah, yeah. Just great. Great stuff from Miss.
um, but yeah, I guess yeah. The other thing I just sort of had mentioned here in the notes was like Lucy has her whole thing that was coming up last arc about how she might be like wedded to the practice. Like, oh, there was the term of like a marriage thing, and there was the whole thing about how being wedded or married was like it didn't necessarily mean like marriage in the romantic sense. And I guess this is just tying back into what I was talking about with Lucy from before. If it, like, I feel like a lot of Lucy's arc has been understanding, like, if you just fight everything like she kind of wanted to do at the start of the story, that's how you end up kind of being like a Charles, like just doing violent shit that doesn't really fix problems. And Lucy has been learning how to, without compromising the fight, like learn to work alongside or within or like these systems, but take the good parts of these systems and work with them while fighting the bad parts. And I guess that's what I see this being a part of that, like her ability to work with Monty and his spider legs or the Turtle Queen and her lack of emotion is also just like, oh, it's all the same as Lucy learning to work with, you know, the better muscles or something. Like it's all about like Lucy learning to, yeah, I guess I don't know the way to phrase it, but she doesn't have to fight everything. You can learn the parts that are worth saving or something. I don't know. Or like, yeah,
Mm,
look past the things that make you angry because, or yeah, disgust you or whatever to get at the good stuff.
yeah. Yeah, yeah.
Sorry, that
So,
was completely incomprehensible.
no, it's a good
But yeah.
analogy, I think. Um, but yeah, so they're talking about what Soot Sleeves has accrued with her information network. The negatives are being taught by ex-Forsworn and people who are on that level, like Freeman, I guess.
Yeah, which is good. I'd actually just fully forgotten that the Kennedys didn't know
Yeah,
that
good to get a
Seth.
bit of okay, we're all on
Yeah,
the same page here, kind of stuff.
yeah, I'd forgotten that they weren't on our page, so I might have like started questioning decisions they were making when if they didn't know that. But I love how we learned one of them. This is where we learned that they're a dragon slayer.
Mm,
And you hear Dragon Slayer and you're like, that sounds fucking badass. And it's like, no, it's just like a big game hunter, like the really shit kind. It's like Milo Sonjite, but for big others. Like, and then just as a real cherry on top, the guy hasn't even really fought a dragon. It's just like the term for people who fight big others.
mm.
Like, go find a dragon. Like, just if you want to be a dragon slayer,
Yeah,
go
we've
find a
already
dragon.
seen one real one. Oh no, wait, sorry, two fake ones in this story.
yeah,
I just had to
yeah,
remember because the portrayal of the dragon that Connor did was so realistic.
yeah. Yeah. You know what? That's the other thing. If dragons are like Connor, big whoop that you killed a dragon.
Yeah, I know, right?
Whatever.
God, it basically killed itself. Yeah, no, it's very practitioner energy, right? Like defining yourself as a dragon slayer. Like, okay, technically correct, but so misleading and misrepresentative.
Yeah, and I mean, I get like part of me is like, okay, just based on like how dragons are in mythology, at least in the West, maybe dragons were by and large some of the shitty others that needed to be stopped.
Mm,
I doubt it. Like it's just a cool way of saying I'm a big game hunter.
yeah, 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 definitely. And not even, yeah, like a trophy hunter. Like it's
Yeah,
really, yeah,
but yeah, it's
kind
just
of pathetic.
it's just Milo Sonjite, but they fight big others instead of murder people.
Mm,
I don't know. Is that better? Like, I guess it sounds better. They get a cooler name. That's the biggest perk.
mm, yeah, yeah.
But yeah, also, so Miss here makes this comment about how like Verona has the thing where she makes it clear that she doesn't think of Brett's house as her home, and Miss is sort of like, yeah, but isn't it always going to kind of be home for you in a way? And Miss obviously
Mm.
draws the connection to how she views Kenneth now that she's got Kenneth found. And I don't, yeah, I wasn't sure what to make of this. I'm curious if you or the audience have any ideas around like where this is going for Verona, because I very much thought she was on the trajectory of like fuck that place.
Ditching that place completely.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's interesting. That kind of flagged for me too. It's yeah, I don't know. It's interesting because Verona doesn't feel any kind of like homeness to that house, right? Does she? I mean,
no, I guess it's kind of the same as what she's had with Brett for the whole story, which is like I still think of that moment right at the start of Arc 2 where it was like obviously she fucking hates her dad, but he's still her dad, so she doesn't want to like see him dead or in pain or whatever, right? Like I guess this that sentiment is bundled up in the house to some degree of like as much as she hates it to some degree that there were a lot of good times in that house as well. Like it's easy for us from where we jumped into Verona's life to think of it as a shit place, but I suppose it sounds like it was pretty good for the first 11 or 12 years.
mm, yeah, I suppose.
I don't know. I don't know. I don't know where that's going. This is one of those things where it feels like a big important thing that's going to lead to something, but I don't know what it's saying.
Mm, yeah, yeah, I don't know. Um,
Yeah, also, sorry. There's also the bit where Miss talks about how she can't really operate, and gather information like she used to because she can't leave Can It Found for like more than 15 minutes without getting sucked back in.
Yes.
And it was just one of those things that made me, I guess, really appreciate, like, this was a reminder of the sacrifice Miss made when she became the demiurge of Can It Found, because
Mm,
it's easy to forget that it was a bit of a sacrifice because now she's essentially a god with her own realm. But it was very much something that went against how she wanted to be. And this is just our little reminder of that, especially when she's like, yeah, now I have to rely on trusting other people and sending them out, which is very fun because one of Mrs. Big things as a character is that she's a massive control freak. So that's like that's a really big challenge for her, is probably just being like, hey, you guys go out and do your thing and let me know how it goes. Like that can't
mm,
be easy for her to do. So I just kind of like I love that, even a character who we don't see that much anymore, like Miss, is, still has her own little character arc going on in the background like that.
yeah. Yeah, yeah. It's true. It's a good call. Good good pull out. Um so yeah, the Turtle Queen arrives, no Rook in tow, of course. Rook's up to something. Um but yeah, Turtle Queen has even more motivation on what's going on next, and the gang kind of tries to figure out Seth's motivation.
Yeah, and look, we got to talk about the first thing Monty says when the Turtle Queen comes in is that she looks dashing, and they sit next to each other, and there's clearly vibes. And I guess, yeah, I feel like when the Father Gobar thing happened and Monty and the Turtle Queen seemed to work together, I thought we were all kind of shit posting about shipping them, but it seems like it's a real thing now, right? Like this is like
Yep.
100% Monty and the
It's
Turtle Queen.
happening. It's
Like
happening.
it's between this ship is now at war with Matthew and Louise for the top ship is clearly what's happening.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. Or of course the classic OTP Avery Janine.
You're still up alone on that hill,
I
huh?
don't know. I think we'll see an epilogue where no, but yeah, it's very funny. Yeah, can we talk about Rook though?
Yeah, no, yeah, okay. Like,
What's going on here?
yeah, the tinfoils are crinkling with Rook, huh? Because it's like Lucy finally addresses the elephant in the room, which is that they need to talk about Rook. But she does kind of finally justify why they haven't been doing that, which is Rook is like Mrs. BFF, and they're not sure how to bring it up without it getting really awkward, which does make sense.
Mm,
But yeah, like I don't know. Again, I reread some of Arc 10 very recently, and the Rook we saw in there and kind of how clever she is makes me think that we're falling for a trap she's setting by kind of simplifying her into an idiot who's just siding with Charles because of her pattern.
I don't think. Yeah, sure. I don't think it's that simple, but really, it doesn't come down to why she's siding with who. To me, it's is she undermining Kenneth?
I I feel like just knowing, like, Rook's whole thing was always positioning. I can't help but think that a big part of it for her is she's doing the classic, I'm playing both sides, so I always come out on top. Like, I think it would not surprise me if we reach some sort of crucial juncture and the decision Rook makes ends up being what is going to make a huge difference for one side or the other. Because her whole thing is putting herself in positions where she has the ability to do that, right?
Mm,
So without knowing which way she's going to go, I feel like this is what, like, that's the sort of thing that's going to happen. Is there's going to reach a point where both sides fates in some important battle are going to be decided by the decision Rook makes, and presumably this will be the point where the Kenneteers / Miss make their case to Rook versus Charles. I think what would be fun is seeing that Rook has the position but hasn't made the moral choice yet, and they actually get the ability to influence what decision she makes in the moment.
mm,
But I feel like the top priority for Rourke is the reason she would suck up to Charles' side a bit is just because she wants to make sure she's got the good positioning. That feels like her like core focus.
mm. Yeah, yeah,
It's just hard to know, yeah, how much to be upset by that.
yeah. It's. I still feel like we haven't had that. I want Lucy to interrogate Rook a bit. You know what I mean? And it's clear that Rook
Yeah,
is kind of ducking that conversation,
yeah. Well, it
right?
feels like it's been months both in and out of story of us being
Yeah,
like, guys, talk to Rourke.
yeah.
Which is also part of why I'm starting to get a little bit like maybe Kenneth isn't fully against what she's doing because like maybe this is just the thing where they're like not talking to Rook because then if they have the conversation with Rook, Charles hears it, right? So
Mm,
best to avoid making her say anything one way or the other. Like
mm,
yeah, Rook's all about positioning. Don't be the one to force her to pick a side, I guess.
yeah, yeah. Um, just want to call out a funny line that Warbo put in here, where Miss it says, "If I may interject," Miss interjected, which I thought was hilarious. Loved it. A classic Warbo joke.
Yeah, it's all those moments where you get a character's mood come in through the narration. Like, yeah, like
Yeah,
Lucy's getting real ticked off by a bunch of stuff at the moment, and yeah.
yeah.
Actually, to talk on that because this is the bit where I think it's Miss and Verona pretty quickly kind of write Seth down as just vengeful.
Mm,
And then it's really Lucy who's kind of sitting on the side, and that just doesn't sit right with her. She thinks about like the Seth that she's seen and knows and knows about, and she's like, revenge just doesn't really feel like it. And so she kind of keeps bringing this up, like she's trying to get more info here, and this is huge. It works because it's only when she kind of tries to clarify this, the Turtle Queen bothers to tell the rest of them that he's not planning on attacking the Blue Heron. He's going for the civilian Bellingers.
mm,
But yeah, like I guess this is just again, I feel like there's a lot to be said in this chapter for the way Lucy's really focusing on getting the advantages of diversity out, even like when it goes against her natural inclinations. Like this isn't the spread of diversity that she usually thrives with. Like obviously, she's all about the benefits of diversity in her fighting styles with her goblin, fae, and dog tag, not so much in the conversations with a bunch of people with very unique angles and takes and ways of communicating on the world. But she really is like consciously making this effort to be like, okay, like Turtle Queen, what is your angle? Like, how can we
mm,
get this information? And yeah, like this is a group of people. Everyone at this table has some sort of very different take from everyone else at the table on how they view the
mm.
world. And Lucy does a lot of effort here with Verona helping out to like get them all and get all these opinions and synthesize them into eventually figuring out what Seth's probably actually about right now.
Yeah,
Right, which is not revenge.
yeah, yeah. It's interesting. You're right. There's a lot of disparate perspectives at this table, and Lucy does a good job at kind of wrangling them all to try and get to this point that they're trying to get to, I suppose.
Yeah. And because like diversity has always been the strength of Kennet, and like it's obviously a thing in real life as well. Is like you different perspectives allow you to consider more stuff, and this is just a group that was struggling to, I guess, use that side of themselves, and Lucy makes a very conscious effort to help that happen. Um,
Mm,
and yeah, I guess to touch on like so, seemingly the take that they end up with for Seth is that it's just he's finally found a rhythm and like something worth fighting for. Like for the first time in his life, he's actually vibing and got stuff to lose, and so now he's like got his motivation.
mm.
And that's so evil from Wildbow. I fucking love it because that's so validating for Charles. Like Seth was someone who never tried, didn't even fight getting forsworn, has just been a useless piece of shit. And now look at him. He's motivated. He's about to take over his whole family. Like, guys, the system works.
Yep. It's
Like,
the new world order, and I think it's a good one.
like it's just this is such a perfect use of Seth in the story for like the guy who never did anything to become the mascot for when Charles's argument can work. It's
Yeah.
just I love it. It's awful and I hate it and I love it. It's so
Mm.
good.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
Um
good stuff.
yeah, and there's obviously there's a lot of talk of him emulating someone. That's something that the Turtle Queen calls out is that he's emulating someone. I think we were talking last week about how it felt like him and Y were representing these different ways of continuing Alexander's legacy. And it certainly would seem to be suggesting that Seth is very much living up to that in that he's like I think a lot of people have assumed that the person he was emulating was actually Alexander.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah.
I I do think you could make the case that the person Seth's emulating is Charles, though, because what he's done is taken this momentum and just turned it into an even bloodier coup, where he's trying to strong arm
Yeah.
the people who used to help him. into
Yeah.
working for him.
Yeah,
Um,
maybe. Yeah, I
well,
think it's fair.
yeah. I mean, this might just come back to the fact that Alexander and Charles might have a lot of similarities that Charles doesn't really want to confront um,
Mm,
in how they operate. But yeah,
yeah.
I do. Yeah, this Seth versus Y sort of war over the Bellinger family and like taking the different aspects of Alexander's legacy is just such a fun idea. I hope that is sort of what's going to happen.
Yeah, I guess hoping for that is fine. Yep.
Yeah, oh, because like Alexander does have such a his interesting legacy in this story too, because he formed the Blue Heron. He was about network. There was so much to like about Alexander, and he was doing a lot of right things. He was also just an absolute piece of shit.
Mm,
And so this is such a fun way. Like, why? Yeah, I mean, we talked about this last week. Why in his interlude was so much focused on how can I take the good bits of Alexander, and I think
mm,
someone like Seth coming in and taking the most toxic parts and bringing them forward is such a fun challenge for him as he's maybe trying to do that.
mm. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I don't know. Would you rather Charles or Alexander? I would pick Alexander.
Oh yeah, Alexander for sure.
um, but anyway, yeah. So the gang decide to call Nicolette to let her know of the impending attack, because they don't really know what else to do.
Yeah. Um,
Yeah.
and again, this is where Lucy makes another big ploy for like the strength of diversity.
Yes.
Whereas at the end of this conversation, she takes this step back and she's thinking, okay, how can we use all the people here in the best way to like fight them? And this is where her future gambit with Montague that we'll talk about when it happens comes. But she does that thing where she takes a step back and she looks at all the people and kind of enters that general
Mm,
mode that she has like general as in war general to be like, okay, what is everyone here bringing as an asset that we can use to stop the negatives? Um,
yeah.
and that's so fun. And I love that she's developing that side of herself alongside getting her like karmic law degree. Like I just think it's so fun that Lucy's arc is very much around, hey, let's like learn the law, fight the system the proper way, blah blah. But also like do be a good general so you can fuck shit up when you need to.
Yeah. Um, yeah, for sure. I think it's great, like seeing Kennett operate as a high functioning community hub. Like it's just so satisfying, right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Mm. Um, but yeah, so they decide to go to the Belanger commune and try and help, and their help is not welcomed.
Yeah. So can we talk about like the cult vibes that are
Yeah,
happening in this Bellinger
right.
compound?
Yeah.
Like I watched like Keep Sweet, Pray and Obey on Netflix a couple of weeks ago, which is like a documentary about the oh, it was a church with a fuck off long name. It had Latter Day Saints in there at some point, I think.
Mm,
But it was the one that the cult from Kimmy Schmidt was based off, which
yeah.
is of course how it was better known.
Yeah.
Um, and so I don't know if it's because I was like watching stuff about like one of those super creepy religious cults recently, but I just found the whole vibe of this Bellinger settlement so unsettling, and
Yeah. It is, isn't it?
also very fascinated by the idea that people like Alexander and Seth were presumably largely raised here. Like,
Yes. Right.
is there a little school in this town? Like, are they doing the full cult vibe of like a little private school, or are they?
Mm.
Do they send? I guess we know why was sent to a fancy private practitioner
Yes.
school.
Yes.
But just the whole thing, it raises so many questions. And now part of me is like, I want a Bellinger story. I want to know
Mm.
what it's like growing up in this weird cult where everyone sees the future.
Yeah, it's strange, isn't it? It's very culty and it's
Yeah.
very closed off. It gives you real horror movie vibes, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's so not what I was actually expecting from the Bellinger family as a whole. I guess this is what it caught me so off guard that the Bellingers just live in their own private little cult. And I guess it makes sense because we kind of see that the point of something like this is it's like well fortified in the sense that they know when trouble's coming. Um
Yeah. Does that
but like
feel fortified? I don't know.
well, yeah. I think Gillian later makes the case that in normal circumstances they were perfectly fine using their system to avoid trouble. The problem is Charles has made everywhere trouble, so there's nothing like you can't avoid it.
Mm.
And I think there's some truth to that. you can sort of criticize their strategy or whatever. But yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I just wouldn't have expected anything like this from the Bellingers, and it makes me so fast. I want to learn more about it. But
Mm,
as is the curse with all things pale, part of me is then like, we probably don't have the bandwidth in the story for that.
mm. Yeah, yeah, probably not. But who knows? We might. We'll see.
I, yeah.
Um, but yeah, so the Bellangers are they really don't react here. Like, you know, Jen has clearly done enough readings. We find out in a little bit to know, yes, trouble's brewing, and the response is kind of like, well, we're not going to do anything about it, so let's wait and until we get fucked a bit, and then we'll maybe do something about it. And it's just kind of like, it's so kind of
What?
pathetic, you know, like
Yeah.
they're and maybe they've kind of fixed it a bit by doing their readings, which clearly is kind of the vibe of how this goes. But it's like, yes, we know this is coming. Yes, some of the family is going to get attacked, and then maybe we'll do something about it. Is basically what Jen says, and it's just sad.
Yeah, well, because like this is the thing that she brings up is like the curse of being an augur is that the more clarity you look for in the future, the more the spirits will tend to make it shit for you because the spirits don't
Mm,
like people looking into the future. Makes sense.
mm,
But so there's basically a balancing act to being an augur of trying to get something that's vague enough that you don't lock in something bad, but also not too vague so that it's useful still.
mm.
And it seems like they're extra cautious doing that around their own futures. And I guess this is like the vibe I almost got from Jen here is when she's talking about how much this attack is going to happen, is going to be violent, some people are going to die. I almost got the vibe that she did like an extra reading that she hasn't told anyone else about.
Mm.
Like, so the rest of them have done kind of vague readings. They know there might be
Yes.
some violence. They don't think they're going to be involved, blah, blah. Whereas like Jen, presumably as head of the family, was able to sneak around the corner, do a more specific one, saw how bad it was, and just I guess didn't want to tell them because that locks it in even more. Or maybe she's just an idiot. I don't know, but like, yeah, it's yeah. I like it just sort of shows how bad the augurs are defensively.
Yeah. It's yeah, I mean, as they say, their strategy is like deflect and call in favors and stuff, and they're out of things to
Yeah,
ways for that to happen.
there's no direction to deflect in anymore. Yeah.
Yeah.
I also I love this bit where yeah, where the Keneteers first appear, they try to be nice, and there's this great moment where Lucy sort of says, "Hey, look, we're not asking for much. Your enemy is our enemy. Why not work together?" And this other guy's like, "Your enemy is our friend, like Mussa."
Mm.
And they bring up Mussa wasn't Alexander's friend. He backed Bristow at the fight over the school, and this guy's like, "Times change." And so Lucy's like, "No, let's change them again. Like Mussa's out of the picture. The fuck are you talking about?"
Yeah,
And then
yeah,
this guy's just like, "Go home." And it's like, I just yeah,
yeah.
I just fucking love.
Can't this guy cannot, even knowing the future, he can't argue against Lucy. She's just too powerful.
But I just love those moments where the Kennedys just so comprehensively outlogic someone, and it's usually Lucy like that, and then he just has to revert to "No, go home, like go back to where you came from." Like, yeah,
Yeah. Um so yeah, the negatives and their teacher attack, and Monty tries to put up a wall. Um, but yeah, we see the Bedlamite scream again. The Kentiers are protected, although I kind of wanted them to see. Well, no, I don't want this. I want to see Avery get hit by the Bedlamite scream and then be like, "No, I believe in myself, and I'm too powerful to get madness." And I think that's going to be really fun if that ever happens.
seems like it's asking a lot of Avery.
She'll be fine. She's practiced with the wolf, you know.
I mean, that's actually a decent point.
Hmm.
Yeah, I don't know. I loved this Bedlamite scream. How the Kennedys are just sitting there and there's like screaming going on in their ears.
And yeah,
Very fun.
that great moment where they're talking, and Jen is like, "How are you talking?" And it's like
Yeah.
doubling over in pain while they're just like, "Oh, we're chilling."
Yeah. It was very, very reminiscent of a certain baddie from a certain other Wild Bow work.
Mhm.
Which is obviously a strong reference. Like if you're gonna bring one enemy from that franchise over, it'd be that one for sure.
Yeah. But yeah, it's good stuff. A strong show of force from the Negatiers here, right? Like there's this, like there's explosions, there's a scream, there's like a lightning bolt of limbs that smashes into a house. Like these teachers are tough, and it's fun to see.
Yeah, we were talking a lot about how all the glimpses we were getting into the Negatiers and the other chapters were really hyping them up as terrifying.
Mm,
And that certainly holds when we see them for the first time from the Kenneteers' perspective. Like,
yeah,
this is Lucy, like, she's the most combat ready. She's good to go. She's protected. And even she's looking around at this shit and it's like, wow, this is fucking apocalyptic.
yeah. Which is very fun to see. I can't wait for the Kennedys to fight them proper.
Yeah. Yeah, oh, and there's even that moment, I think, Verona makes a comment about how the Negatiers have, like, strategized more since their last this is the bit you were mentioning, actually, where I think Jillian is
Mm,
like, "How the fuck are you talking?"
yes,
Um,
yes.
and because Lucy and Verona are like, "Oh, they must have gone back and, like, ironed out their plan after a not so smooth first one." Kinda like we used to do, and there was actually a thing that we didn't talk about earlier in this chapter where Miss talks about how the Negatiers operate, and Lucy's like, "Well, that sounds vaguely familiar." Um, I love that this is one of those stories where, like, the one of the obvious things about the Negatiers is that they're a mirror to the Kenneteers, and this is a story where the Kenneteers are, like, realizing and acknowledging that as it's happening. Like,
Mm,
that's so but I
yeah.
can't wait to see how that comes into, like, yeah, the confrontations between them because the Kenneteers are clearly recognizing that the Negatiers are, in a lot of ways, going through the same stuff they did.
Mm, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think it'll be really fun. I mean, I can't wait for more conversations with the Negatives. I think we're just going to get some really fun moral arguments between these groups, and I think it's going to be great.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um. So yeah, the wall is breached. The truce is broken, and shit is gonna pop off. Is how this chapter ends.
I love Lucy's gambit here. This was so clever.
Mm-hmm.
The idea that
Mm-hmm.
she's saying Monty is honor. Attacking him is attacking us.
Yeah.
And that sets up that dynamic where they can't attack them unless they either disavow Charles or they admit that they're working with Charles, and that's effectively breaking the truce. It's so
Yep.
big brain, and yeah, gets Karma on her side. Such a perfectly like where Lucy is in her character arc move. Where
Yeah.
it's just like
It.
so good.
Yeah. It's a perfect like little bit of legal trickery kind of vibes.
Hmm.
Oh, now
Like this
you're in
is
breach. We're forcing you to either back down or be in breach. Oh, you're going to be in breach, right? Time to go. You know.
yeah. This is Lucy perfectly setting up. I guess what we're talking about before. Where it's like Lucy is learning how to use the legal system, but also using it in such a way that then she can rain fucking fire on you with the violence she's also been training in because you fucked up. Like
Yeah.
yeah, like bring the punishment down for breaking the rules.
Yeah. Um, so yeah, truce broken. I think we'll get a fun fight here, and I wonder what the next step for this will be. Like, are they going to try and reestablish the truce a bit? Probably not. Like now the bridge is broken, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I've I've learnt that I just do not have the ability in these wild bow stories to
To
predict whether
predict. Yeah,
yeah,
you're no Belanger. That's for
yeah,
sure.
exactly. Like it does feel like this is because we've seen these situations in the wild bow stories before. Particularly, I'm thinking of some bits impact where it's like this either represents a shift that will like change the dynamic, but kind of be ongoing for a bit, or like we're just going to open the next chapter and the shit is going to have hit the fan, and the acceleration
Mm,
is going to be just insane.
mm, yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, like I can't. You're right. Like once we get out of Belangerville, here, regardless of how this battle goes, like
Yeah.
it's gonna be like either shit's gonna pop off pretty much immediately with Charles, or there's gonna be some really interesting slow build now that the truce is kind of broken.
Yeah, I don't know what to expect, but I'm sure it'll be fun. Can't wait. But that's
Yeah,
for next chapter, next week, I suppose.
yeah. But we've got some Pale predictions left in the Pale Predictor app before we move on.
Hell yeah. I'm going to pull mine out quickly, which is very straight and to the point. Here it is. 5 words. Alpi will become Sheridan's familiar. Boom. There it is. That's all it
That's
is.
that's from Belegtal.
From Belegtal, yes. I don't know if this one tracks at all, but I do just love the wild Sheridan predictions that people have been throwing in this week. Like people are obsessed with Sheridan as a practitioner, and I love it, and I'm so here for it.
Yeah, Yeah, we're going to talk about this a lot in the discussion question, but
Yes, true.
I'm fully on board with Sheridan as a practitioner. She's going to be fun, and
Yeah.
the only reason I disagree with Beleg Tal is because I'm pretty sure Sheridan's going to pick someone goblin adjacent, just like Avery did.
Mm.
Or maybe it's the opposite, because Avery's very not goblin, and she got her goblin adjacent familiar.
Mm.
Maybe Sheridan needs a fairy adjacent familiar, which would also kind of, but like if like fairy with a Y, like that
Yeah,
tacky
yeah, yeah.
CW vibe,
Yeah, I can see that.
like because you want the not the clever artistic fairies, but the ones that are just kind of lame and silly. That vibes with her show. Yeah, I'm gonna lock in. Sheridan will get a fairy with a Y familiar.
I like it. All right, put it in the sheet. Speaking of predictions, which prediction did you pick?
Yes, I've got one from our old friend Lapsed Classicist. It's quite long to basically TLDR it. Lapsed Classicist pointed out that like Harry is the negateer who's learning how to use horrors
Yes.
to sort of shoot arms at people and stuff.
Hmm.
And her cousin Adrian is the one who's doing technomancy, which, as we all know, technomancy involves a lot of spatial stuff, which is what kind of creates horrors when it goes wrong. We
Yes.
saw that in Freeman's backstory.
Yes.
So basically, Lapse Classicist is predicting that Adrian's going to fuck something up that will combo fuck up with Harry's practice, and things will not go well for them.
Yeah, which I
Um,
think is a very fun
yeah, I
idea.
love
I
it.
think it will go crazy if it happens. It will be
Yeah.
hilarious.
The insight into the synergy between the fact that Harry is walking around with warped space bombs and Adrian is running around warping space and their cousins who have never quite been on the same page when we've seen them. I love that idea.
Yeah. Yeah. Loved it. Great stuff.
Yeah.
And of course, we have discussion. We've been running a discussion question for the past fortnight that we've got a lot of great answers to, which was which member of Avery's family would be the best practitioner? I think
Yeah.
we got a lot of Sheridan should be apprenticed to Durachet talk here, which I was interesting to me. I guess it tracks with the primeval stuff, but I don't think it's a good idea.
I I assumed those were all jokes. I don't think any of those people were serious
No, I think they're all serious.
because, like the primeval thing is funny, but it's clear Sheridan will die. Like,
Mm,
yeah,
yeah,
I
yeah,
just
for sure.
yeah. I guess to get into the answers, we got Beleg Tal, who suggested that the Kelly who might be the best practitioner is perhaps Avery Kelly.
Hmm.
And to this answer, I say boo,
Yep,
boo
great.
you.
Good answer,
You
Billy
know what you
Joel.
did.
Yeah. A few people did answers that ran through a lot of the Kellys. Megafire's answer was running through why none of the Kellys really would be the 2B practitioners, which I think was more. I thought there were some great points in here, but I also was kind of like, actually, what this really says is being a practitioner is just dangerous and kind of fucked.
Yeah, I like it was interesting because I found myself disagreeing with a fair bit of what Mega was saying, but I think coming from a place of I think based on reading Mega's answer, I think we might have been picturing different things. Like Mega was
Mm,
coming very much, I think, from a place of like thinking of more like the average practitioner you would see at the Blue Heron, like
yes.
if any Kelly kind of got dropped into the Blue Heron, how would they all go? Whereas I'm very much have been thinking about it, at least in the context of this podcast, in terms of like how they would go as a practitioner of Kennet. So
Yeah.
like I guess if I'm right, like if we are looking at it from Mega's sort of thing of how would they go as just like a regular kind of practitioner? I think a lot of their criticisms of these guys as people are pretty valid. Like Rowan is absolutely somebody who without a bit of prodding will have blind spots for treating others as people and stuff and
Mm.
Declan, don't get us started on Declan. So yeah, I did think it was interesting though. The one of the big things Mega said as well was that Connor and Kelsey shouldn't really do it because they won't dive all into the practice.
Mm.
And I thought that was interesting because, like, have we heard much about like casual practitioners? Is casual practicing a thing? Like, I guess we know about dabblers, but like, part of me was like, well, shouldn't you allowed to be a practitioner who just is like a hobby practitioner? Like, I just practice on the weekends.
Yeah, chill hobby practitioner vibes is definitely what I get as
Yeah,
well.
And again, maybe I'm just criticizing a scenario Megafire was explicitly not addressing and was trying to address how would they go as full-time
As full
practitioners. But yeah,
time, yeah, yeah. Um, but yeah, I thought Megafire had some really great points.
yeah,
I'm easily impressed gave a really good answer, I think, which was Brienne, who was one of the Kelly cousins, who was seemed pretty perceptive about things like Avery being gay and the kid conceived at the wedding kind of stuff. Kind
yeah,
of clever, picks things up, seemed pretty passionate about what she did. Like, could be a good practitioner vibes.
yeah, yeah. I like that answer. Like bit out of left field, but that's the best kind.
Yeah,
Um, Manukos came in and I think agreed. This would have been my answer if I'd been
yeah,
asked to
me
answer the
too.
question, which is Declan.
Yeah,
He likes all the games and the logic puzzles. Manukos does say that he's already practiced at dehumanizing people, which is definitely the obstacle for Declan. Although I suppose this comes down to what do you define as the best kind of practitioner? Are we
yeah. I mean, he'll
talking?
be a great practitioner. I think this is what
Yeah.
Minuko said. He'll be a great practitioner, but not a good practitioner, which I think
Yes.
is
Yeah.
very true.
But this is my thing. Like, I think I talked about this last week or in the Connor interlude. Like I would argue for awarifying Declan now and getting him that exposure because I like the longer Declan isn't exposed to diversity, whether it's just in people or others, like the longer he's going to keep being this kind of shit. Like 80% of people who are like Declan, it's because they just haven't had to spend as much time as they should with other people. So it's like, I can put him in that civility course when he says something stupid, and do it ASAP. And I think, yeah, like his natural predisposition to a lot of the like gamification and stuff, I think he would do well under the practice and we can fix him.
Yeah, yeah, I think so too. Maybe a trap, but I think it'd be
Worth
fine.
trying.
Yeah. Expensive ad 8633 goes through for each of the family kind of which area of the practice feels like it would be the right fit for them, and then kind of settles on Connor as their pick for the best practitioner, just because of kind of he's already quite practiced and cautious about the world through his interactions with Avery, and I think that's very clever because being a practitioner that survives for a long time, you want to be cautious.
Yeah. There were a lot of multiplications in this answer that I think is a pack dice thing at the end.
Yes.
So I didn't understand that part, but I liked the rest of it.
Yeah, that's kind of the
um,
pack dice categorization of areas of practice.
Okay, yeah, I figured I had to do something like that because they're all words I recognize, but not in a context I did. But I liked the justifications for Connor are actually why I think you could make all of the same ones for Rowan. Like I thought it was interesting that expensive ad I think singled out all of the traits that Connor has that I would argue Rowan also shares, except maybe the like experience being a good dad. Rowan's not there yet, but I very much just view Rowan as 18-year-old Connor. So yeah, for all the same reasons expensive ad says Connor, I think like we're seeing Rowan do a lot of the same stuff right now.
Mm.
Like a lot of attention in story has been getting given to how Rowan is just kind of sitting quietly and listening rather than, as opposed to Sheridan who's just kind of yelling out about primeval's any chance she gets.
Yeah, yeah. She's. I hope she doesn't get herself killed. Yeah. Um, and then we got an answer from Thomas Berubeg, who does list off again various practice areas for the family that I think were all pretty good. Doesn't give a firm answer on their top pick, but I liked Kelsey as the blackguard. That felt really strong to me. So not really a practitioner, I guess, but part of the world.
Yeah. Yeah, I do. I think we saw a couple of other people suggest the same sort of thing where like Kelsey just doesn't seem like somebody who should go past awareness. I don't know whether the plan is for her to the Kelly Dynasty plans are still very vague at the moment, so it'll be interesting to see exactly where her and Connor are sitting on that. But I feel like I agree with a lot of the people where she just feels better off as the aware blackguard than like an actual member of the awoken crew.
Yeah, yeah. Some great answers. I love these. I loved a lot of people broke down different areas of the practice for different family members,
Yeah.
but I love that everyone gave. Here's my pick, and we'll come back maybe if we see, Declan becomes the number one practitioner in Eastern Canada, and we can give Manukos props.
That'll actually be. There's only going to be one epilogue chapter for
The
Pale,
Declan
and yeah,
epilogue,
it's going to be
where
15
Declan
years later
becomes
from
the new
Declan.
Carmine / head practitioner of Eastern Canada.
Yeah, yeah. So they'll defeat Charles in
Yeah.
one chapter, and then the next chapter is just going to be the only epilogue chapter. It's 15 years later. Declan is claiming his final lordship. He's secured all of Ontario.
Oh, good stuff.
But yeah, so that's the end of this discussion question. So I suppose we should get into the next one.
Yes, our discussion question for next week. Next week? Don't you mean next fortnight? No,
I
I
don't.
don't, Elliot, and explain why.
We're going to try going back to weekly because recently we've been having more discussion questions than we've been able to do, and also sometimes the fortnightly ones become irrelevant by the time we get to talk about your answers. So we're going to try going back to weekly, and see if it works.
Yeah. So leave your answers to our discussion question in the show notes down in the discussion thread down below. That discussion question is: what other surprising ships in Pale would you find to be delightful? Now, to be clear, we mean ships like relationships, not boats.
Don't tell us about your favorite colonial era.
Nice try,
Voyager.
whoever was going to put that in. But yeah, we obviously saw the Turtle Queen / Monty ship starting to blossom this chapter. So, what other ships do you think you would really enjoy?
Yeah, inspired by both Monty and Turtle Queen, and I think Matthew and Louise is probably the other one where
Avery and
it
Jane, yeah.
the big three.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm curious to see what other ones, and very specifically that keyword there is delightful. That word is there to make sure that people don't get weird with this question. It's got to be a ship that you think people will like. Please, I'm begging you.
Yeah. So yeah, post those. Let's keep it PG and cool. In the thread. Yeah, cool. I'm sure we will.
This is a family friendly podcast.
Yeah, exactly.
We need children as young as Lucy to be able to listen to this.
Exactly right. So yeah, leave your answers to that in the discussion thread, which you can find linked in the show notes down below. You can also find a link in those show notes to our Twitter, where we post a fresh new Pale meme each and every day. So come and check those out. You'll really enjoy them. That's at Pale Reflectcast.
We haven't posted a meme for a bit. Oh, sorry, we have, but Ruben, I've been working on one that's taking me far too long. But it's going to be great when it happens.
How complex is it? They're usually like 3 or 4 words on an image that we take from meme templates.
It's a 48-second video, Ruben. I've put
Holy
too much effort into it already.
All right, so prepare for the debut of Elliot's feature.
I don't think it's going to be done this week. We'll see. I don't want to put any deadlines on it.
Well, art takes time. And
also, it's really only 2 people are going to enjoy it. But it's going to be for those 2 people, they're going to really enjoy it.
Yeah. So if you want to, I guess, be notified of when Elliot's new masterpiece drops, go to @PaleReflectCast on Twitter.
Yes, don't forget to stop by our website too, doofmedia.com. That's where you can find out more about this show and all the other shows on the Doof Media Network. Kingslingers is about to reach the end of season 2, I think, or they're in the last book, but it's a fucking long book, so maybe they're not that close. I don't know.
If you want to find out more about if you want to support the Doof Media Network, you can do that by becoming a patron at patreon.com/doofmedia. You get access to all kinds of bonus shows and content, including a show that I think we're going to record next week. Is that right, Elliot? Coming soon for our new episode of High Ground.
Yeah, it's Sunday, so I'm not exactly sure what you mean by next week, but it's like 8-10 days it'll come out.
Yeah, so stay tuned for that. That'll be a fun one. We're starting a new movie series that will be delightful, I'm sure.
I can't wait.
Yeah.
And don't forget to stop by Wildbow's Patreon, patreon.com/Wildbow. Otherwise, he won't finish the story. He said if you specifically listening right now don't go and up your donation, he's going to stop.
Yeah. So make sure you head to patreon.com/Wildbow for that. And with that, we'll see you all next week, folks.
See ya.
Bye.